Have you ever had a problem that no matter what you did, you just couldn't solve it? And I'm not talking about math here, I'm talking about real life. I'm talking about you just couldn't figure out what to do. Like maybe you committed to going to the movies with one friend, and then that same night you also agreed to go to a party at another friend's house, and you just couldn't figure out how to do both. Or when you're driving somewhere, you get a flat tire and you suddenly are stuck on the side of the road, you don't want to call mom or dad, and you're not quite sure what to do next. Big or small, when you find yourself stuck in a problem that seems to have no quick solution, it can feel pretty overwhelming, right? We've been talking about injustice over the last couple of weeks. Injustice is when a human is treated, valued, or cared for as something less than the human being God created them to be. And that's evil, whether we see it that way or not. And when it comes to injustice, we said we all have the tendency to not see it sometimes, both in ourselves and in the world around us. And before we dive in today, I just want to close it out by just being real and honest for just a second. Because maybe you've been sitting here the last few weeks listening to us talk about poverty and hunger and bullying and unkindness and the pain in the world. And maybe, if you're being honest, you've been frustrated. Or maybe it's your first time here, but you're already listening to me and you're already a little confused. Why? Because if we're honest, I think we'd all admit that as much as we're talking and praying about injustice, the reality is, and I get it, it truly feels like one of those problems that we just can't solve. Think about it. How can one teenager or one small group or one student ministry or one church or one generation for that matter solve problems like hunger or racism or slavery or oppression or bullying or even teen suicide or any of the long list of injustices happening in and around us? I mean, when I think about it, it's just completely overwhelming. And if you're being honest, I'd bet you feel the same way. I think for most of us, our response to hearing about or seeing or studying injustice is something like this. It's terrible, and somebody should really do something about it. Because when we think about that, we don't necessarily think of ourselves as that somebody. And I'm with you. We mean somebody who has a clue, or money, or someone who has influence, or someone that has the time to actually come up with a plan and make a difference. Somebody like the adults, or the authorities, or the church, or the people who've been elected to government, like they seem like they can do something, or maybe someone like Oprah, or Michelle Obama, or Kanye and Kim. Okay, maybe not that far. But you know where I'm going with this, right? And maybe you don't think of somebody famous, but you're definitely not picturing yourself. Like when you think about somebody doing something about it, come on, you don't really see yourself as that somebody. But there are two things I want you to know about that today. First, for the most part, somebody isn't doing anything about it, or at least not enough somebodies. If enough people were really doing something about the injustices in the world, injustice probably wouldn't be as big of an issue, right? And the second thing, you are a somebody. Hear me, you are a somebody. We all are. And trust me when I tell you that you just might be one somebody everybody else is waiting on to take a step towards responding to injustice in your school or your community or even in the world. And maybe that sounds crazy to you right now, okay? Just stick with me, hear me out, because I think the letter we're about to read might change your mind. We're going to look at a letter in the Bible written by a guy named James, who is actually, this is crazy, the brother of Jesus. I think that means not only does he probably know a lot about the way Jesus lived his life, but it also means James knows a thing or two about feeling unqualified to be a somebody. I mean, come on, if Jesus were your brother, wouldn't you just be tempted to think, I don't need to take care of this, somebody else will. I don't know, like my brother Jesus, you know? But that's not what James said. In his letter to a group of Christians who were facing more injustice in their world than we've ever imagined in ours, he challenged them by saying this. Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. So right out the gate, it's clear James is talking about injustice. He's asking the people to imagine one of the most common forms of it, human beings who don't have enough food and clothes. Clearly, somebody should do something about this, right? James seemed to think so. That's why he says this next. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? This seems obvious, right? Of course you don't say to a guy starving or without enough clothes, I know you're hungry and freezing, and I really do hope you find peace, get warm, and eventually find some food. See ya! Oh, come on. When you put it that way, it sounds pretty heartless. But you know what? I think that's what we're all tempted to do sometimes. When faced with the hugeness of a problem that we don't know how to solve, we may not actually say it out loud, but we often just settle for simple words over actual actions. Maybe we say, I'll pray for you, or maybe we even commit to saying a prayer, or we think about it every once in a while, or maybe we post about the issue on social media, or we talk about it at school. I'm not saying any of that is bad. I just think that James's point is that it shouldn't be the only thing that we do. The problem of injustice is a big one. It's bad. And because it's such a big and bad problem, we don't know how to solve it. And because we can't solve it, we just end up doing nothing at all outside of just talking about it. We join the hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of people waiting for and praying for somebody to actually do something, but miss the opportunity God may be giving us to be that somebody. In fact, our ability to act and do something about the injustice in the world is directly connected to our faith. Here's what I mean. Look what James says next. In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. It's a massive statement. Here's the thing about James. He was the realest of the real. You don't have to guess what he was thinking or feeling because he just straight up told you no matter how harsh it was. But he's basically saying, sure, if you're a Christian, you can talk about all the wrongs in the world and what God thinks about them, but until you actually do something, until you act, well, your faith isn't fully alive. And that's not the kind of faith Jesus asks us to have. It's not the faith he asked me to have or you to have. Jesus came so that our lives and our faith could be lived to the fullest. And until we start acting on the injustice we see that breaks the heart of God, our faith isn't living up to its fullest potential. James wants us to see our actions as part of our faith, to see that they're connected and can't exist apart from each other. Jesus taught people about the injustices in the world. He talked about them all the time. But that wasn't all that he did. He also acted on them. He stood against wrongs. He helped the poor. He welcomed the outcast and defended the defenseless. His faith was fierce and active and unrelenting and generous and dangerous to injustice everywhere. It was fully alive. Could you imagine if that was what characterized our faith? Because that's the kind of faith that we can have too. So maybe it's time we stop praying for God to send somebody to do something and we start asking ourselves, am I that somebody? So keep talking and keep praying and keep thinking about the injustices you see around you. But don't let it stop there. Start asking God how you can step in to be that somebody that does just one small thing about it. And then be that somebody. Take a step towards living a fully alive faith by acting on the injustice you see around you. Because a living faith is an active faith. And when faith in Jesus meets injustice, that faith acts. Now look, I'm not saying you need to leave here tonight and take on world hunger completely. I'm not telling you to drop out of school and start combating global slavery tomorrow. Please do not drop out of school. I'm not even telling you to start with the big and bad problems you see all over the world around you. Here's what I'm saying. Start with what's right in front of you. It's that simple. You can't be somebody to everybody. Watch this. You can be somebody to one person. You may not be able to do anything about world hunger, but what about the kids in your community who don't have enough to eat? You may not stop the mistreatment of children around the world, but what about that kid bullied at your school every single day at lunch? You may not be able to stop poverty on a global level, but what about the family in your community you know that could use some help? That's what today is all about. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing someone's world. That's where it starts. Our faith comes alive when we help just one person, then another, and another, and another, one person at a time. That's how we make an impact on injustice in our world. Change a world, and eventually, you'll change the world. That's the fire I want God to light in your heart. It's the one I'm praying He lights in mine too. Because the world is waiting on somebody to do something, and I truly believe that this room is full of somebodies. You have the potential to change the world in big and small ways, one life at a time. The potential for a ripple effect is massive. I mean, change a world and eventually you'll change the world. So where do we start? I want you to think about an injustice you see in the world. Think about something that truly breaks your heart. Maybe it's homelessness or orphans or poverty or slavery or even suicide. Whatever it may be for you, think about that injustice. the evil you see in the world around you. Then, just find one way to bring your faith to life in response to that injustice. Just find one way to be that somebody who does something about it. It could be volunteering one Saturday at a ministry that helps the homeless. It could be reaching out to a classmate who's often on the other side of bullying. It could be giving some time or money to an organization working to fight slavery. It could even be donating some of your clothes or toys to a local orphanage, or it could be donating your time to help out a family in need at your church. It could even be as simple as a Google search to find out what people in your community might already be doing to combat that injustice right here at home. Find one way to take action this week and be the somebody that somebody else is waiting for. Change a world, and eventually you'll change the world. I truly believe that the love of Jesus is going to change the world. I truly believe that a living and active faith is the best weapon we have to see and fight the injustice in the world. One person at a time, one life at a time, one need at a time. So come on, what do you say we do something about injustice? Let's open our eyes. Let's be somebody. Let's go change someone's world. And then maybe we'll end up seeing God use us to change the world.